The crows of Ravenwood. When the fields go silent. Have you ever stood alone in a field, where the only sound is the wind slipping through dead grass, and the crows watching you from above, black as the void between stars? Have you ever wondered what they know? What they see? And what they're waiting for? This story begins in a forgotten corner of America, somewhere in the plains of Iowa, where farmlands stretch endlessly beneath a sky that never sleeps. Out here, people still believe in omens. In signs from the natural world. They read the sky, the soil, and yes, the crows. Especially the crows. The town of Ravenwood was always small, just a patch of homes and weather-worn barns surrounded by endless fields. People came here to disappear. Some never left because of choice. Some, because of something far stranger. It all started with a woman named Sarah Whitlock. She was a local schoolteacher, late 30s, a bit of a loner but kind-hearted. People liked her, but they always said there was a sadness in her eyes, like she'd seen something she couldn't explain. Sarah had lived in Ravenwood her whole life, in her family's farmhouse perched on the edge of the wheat fields. But one autumn, something changed. The fields went silent. The birds vanished. Except the crows. A field without sound. It was mid-October, right when the harvest moon hung low and golden over the earth. That's when Sarah noticed it first. She'd take her morning walks like she always did, coffee mug in hand, sweater pulled tight against the crisp air. But the usual morning symphony, songbirds, crickets, the rustle of rabbits in the brush, was gone. Replaced by a cold, unnatural silence. And then the crows came. Hundreds of them. Perched along the fence posts, the telephone wires, and in the brittle arms of the dead oak trees lining the road. They didn't caw. They didn't move. They just watched. At first, Sarah thought it was a natural migration. Maybe a shift in the seasons. But when she mentioned it to the townsfolk at the diner, their faces turned pale. Old Mr. Halverson, a retired farmer, leaned in close and said in a low voice, "It's happened before. The crows only gather when the field wakes up." Sarah asked, "What field?" But Halverson only said, "The one that's not supposed to be there. The forgotten field." Sarah was no stranger to ghost stories. Ravenwood had its fair share. But this one felt different. That night, unable to sleep, she found herself standing on her porch, staring out at the fields. And in the silver glow of the moon, she saw it. Beyond the familiar rows of corn and wheat, there was something else. A darker patch of land, where no crops grew, where the wind bent the grass in circles, and where the crows gathered thickest, forming a black halo above the earth. It wasn't there before. She ventured out the next morning. The earth in that field was cold to the touch, like it hadn't felt the sun in years. No tracks. No animal prints. No signs of tractors or planting. Just barren soil, and a single, rusted scarecrow standing alone in the center. But the scarecrow wasn't facing outward like they normally do. It was facing her. And the crows perched on its shoulders, silent as death. The letter. That night, Sarah found an old letter tucked beneath the floorboards of her family home. The handwriting was shaky, as if written by someone barely holding on to reality. It was addressed to her grandfather, dated 1924. "To whoever finds this, know that the field cannot be tilled, for what lies beneath was never meant to be disturbed. The crows are the watchers. When they gather, stay away, lest you wake the roots of madness itself. The land remembers. And it waits." The letter ended abruptly, smeared with something dark. Sarah's hands trembled. She remembered stories her grandfather told when she was little, about a hidden field that had swallowed entire families whole. She thought they were just bedtime tales meant to scare kids into behaving. But now she wasn't so sure. Darkness beneath the soil. The next morning, more crows appeared. Now they weren't just sitting quietly. They followed her. Every step she took, they hopped along the fences, shifting as if they were guiding, or warning, her. Sarah's dreams turned violent. She saw faces beneath the soil, pale and wide-eyed, mouths open in silent screams. She'd wake drenched in sweat, the echo of wings flapping against her window. The townspeople avoided her. Even the children at the school whispered rumors behind her back. They said Sarah was marked. That she had heard the whisper of the field. And in her heart, she feared they were right. The man in the hat. On the 5th day, a stranger came to town. No one saw him arrive. He simply appeared, standing beneath the old oak outside the church. Tall, thin, dressed in a long black coat, with a wide-brimmed hat that cast a shadow over his face. The townsfolk avoided him, crossing streets to steer clear. But the crows. They gathered around him in a circle, silent and still. Sarah, driven by a strange mix of fear and curiosity, approached him. He spoke first. "The field has chosen you, Miss Whitlock." His voice was low, like distant thunder. "Do not resist it. What sleeps beneath will awaken soon." Sarah demanded answers, but the man only smiled, revealing teeth too sharp, too white, like something pretending to be human. Then, without another word, he turned and walked straight into the field. The crows followed, leaving the town in an eerie, deathly quiet once again. The choice. Sarah stood alone, the wind pulling at her hair, the weight of the unknown pressing down on her chest. She could leave. Pack her bags, abandon Ravenwood, forget the strange field and the eyes of the crows. Or, she could follow. And find out what lay beneath the soil. But some truths are better left buried beneath the hollow roots. They say the hardest part of facing the unknown is deciding to take the first step. Sarah took that step. The next morning, while the sky bled gray and the frost clung to the fields, she wrapped herself in her thickest coat, pulled on her grandfather's old boots, and crossed into the forgotten field. And the moment her foot broke the edge of that barren soil, the world changed. The air turned thin and cold. The wind stopped moving. And the crows, hundreds of them, lined the fence like silent jurors, watching her trial begin. The scarecrow's secret. She walked until she reached the scarecrow. Its face was stitched burlap, but the stitches had come undone, revealing something human underneath. Pale skin. Dried lips. Eyes wide open. Sarah gasped and stumbled back, her breath fogging the air. It wasn't a scarecrow. It was a body. Or what was left of one. And then, from deep below her feet, she felt it. A low hum. Like the earth itself was breathing. The crows all took flight at once, filling the sky with a black storm of wings. The sound was deafening, like the roar of forgotten voices crying out from beneath the earth. The buried legend. Later that night, shaken but unable to stay away, Sarah returned to her family's attic and dug through boxes of old journals and newspaper clippings. She found what she feared. Ravenwood was built on a dark legend. In the 1800s, during the westward expansion, a traveling preacher named Silas Crane came through the plains. He spoke of salvation, but behind his words hid something darker. People said he was obsessed with the thin places, patches of land where the veil between the living and the dead wore thin. He claimed the Ravenwood field was one of those places. A doorway. And in his madness, he sacrificed his entire congregation in that very soil to open the door to something beyond. But the townspeople buried the field. Buried the truth. And the scarecrow was left to mark the place, trapping whatever horror Silas Crane tried to release. Until now. Until Sarah found it. The return of the stranger. The next night, the man in the wide-brimmed hat returned. Sarah found him waiting by her porch, the crows perched silently along the roof like statues. "You felt it, didn't you?" he whispered. "The field knows your name now." Sarah demanded to know who he was. He removed his hat. Beneath it was a face both young and impossibly ancient, eyes reflecting stars that didn't belong to this sky. "I am what Silas Crane left behind. A piece of what he tried to unleash. And now it stirs. Because of you." He told her the truth. That each generation, the field chose one soul to guard the threshold, to keep the thing beneath from rising. Her grandfather had been the last. And now, it was her turn. But guarding the field meant isolation. Madness. A life spent between reality and nightmare. She would never leave Ravenwood. Never escape the eyes of the crows. "You are the gatekeeper now." And with that, he vanished into the night. Fractures in the mind. Sarah's world unraveled. She began hearing voices in the static of the radio, whispers in the wind, seeing shadows that didn't belong. In the school, her students' faces blurred, their laughter turning hollow and distant. She dreamed of walking endlessly through endless fields, her feet sinking into black soil that pulled her down, whispering her name over and over again. Reality and nightmare blended until she wasn't sure where one ended and the other began. The Crow Song. One night, while she sat on her porch, unable to sleep, the crows began to sing. Not caw, not cry, sing. A deep, mournful melody that rose through the night like a funeral hymn. The melody stirred something ancient in Sarah's heart. Sadness. Longing. And fear. It was a warning. The field was waking up. And she was running out of time. The hollow door. The next day, the earth cracked open. Literally. A fissure split the center of the field where the scarecrow stood. From it, a low, cold fog seeped out, bringing with it the stench of rot and decay. Sarah knew what it meant. The door Silas Crane tried to open a century ago, it was opening. and whatever lay beneath was ready to rise. Isolation and despair. Sarah pleaded with the townspeople for help. She begged the sheriff, the pastor, even the old farmers who once whispered warnings to her. But they all turned away. "It's your burden now," they said. "Just like it was your grandfather's." No one would help. No one could. The final hour. With no one left to turn to, Sarah stood at the edge of the field as the sun set, the sky burning blood-red behind her. She had a choice. Let the door open and risk releasing something that could consume the world. Or sacrifice herself to seal it shut, like her grandfather before her. But she knew there was no real choice. In her heart, the field had already claimed her. As the first stars blinked awake in the sky, Sarah stepped forward into the fog, the crows circling above like black angels of fate. And from deep within the earth, something smiled. The silence that follows. Have you ever wondered what happens in the moment right before the end? Before the last breath leaves your lungs? Before the sky turns cold and indifferent? Before the world forgets your name? Sarah Whitlock did. And as she stood alone in the hollow field, beneath the sky swirling with crows, she finally understood. Some endings are written long before you're born. The door fully opens. The crack in the earth widens, spilling black fog across the wheat fields, swallowing the landscape in an unnatural night. From deep below, something massive began to stir, a pulse, like the heartbeat of a sleeping god. The crows screamed. Not in fear, but in warning. Sarah could feel the pull of the thing beneath the soil. It wasn't a creature, exactly. It was hunger. Memory. Madness given form. And it was waking. But in that chaos, something else happened. Sarah felt a presence at her side. A familiar ghost. Her grandfather appeared, just as she remembered from childhood, his worn flannel jacket, his tired, kind eyes. "I tried to stop it too," he said softly. "I tried to protect you from this. But the field. It chooses. And once it chooses, there's no going back." Tears burned in Sarah's eyes. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because you cared enough to listen." In that moment, she realized, the field didn't claim those who were cruel or blind to the world. It chose those who still believed in saving it. The bargain. The man in the wide-brimmed hat returned, his silhouette framed by lightning in the distance. He stood at the edge of the fissure, smiling like the devil at a funeral. "It's not too late," he offered. "Walk away. Let the world burn. It would be so easy." But Sarah saw through him now. He wasn't offering freedom. He was offering escape from responsibility, from sacrifice. And that was never her way. She stepped forward, raising the old scarecrow's wooden stake like a crucifix. "If it takes a life to seal this door, take mine." The man's smile faded. For the first time, his confidence cracked. "You would give yourself? For them?" "Yes." He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "Foolish. Beautifully foolish." And then, as the crows descended in a black spiral, Sarah drove the stake into the heart of the hollow earth. The collapse. The ground shook violently. The fissure screamed as if the earth itself was in pain. The fog recoiled. The thing beneath let out a roar so ancient, it didn't sound like noise at all, it sounded like the end of time itself. The sky cracked open. And then slammed shut. The crows scattered like shadows in sunlight. And in the sudden silence, the world exhaled. Sarah fell to her knees. Her vision blurred. Coldness wrapped around her like a shroud. But the field was still. A different kind of death. Sarah didn't die in the way people understand death. Her body remained, breathing, heart beating. But something inside her was gone. She had become part of the field. Its guardian. Its voice. Its memory. She could feel its roots in her thoughts now, hear the whispers of those who had guarded it before her. Her grandfather. Silas Crane's victims. Every soul who had stood at this crossroads and made the same sacrifice. And now it was her turn to wait. Wait for the next storm. The next awakening. Because the field never stays quiet forever. The town moves on. In Ravenwood, the world moved on. The crows disappeared, returning to the skies like any ordinary birds. The fields regrew. The winds returned. People forgot. Sarah's house sat empty, her coffee cup still resting on the porch rail, catching dust and rain. Children spoke her name in whispers, daring each other to step near the field at night. Some claimed they could still see her silhouette standing among the wheat, watching, waiting. But no one ventured too close. Because some stories, some legends, are warnings, not myths. The final voice. And somewhere in the lonely fields of Iowa, Where the wind carries secrets and the sky keeps its distance, the crows still gather when the air turns cold. And if you listen closely, really listen, you might hear a voice on the breeze. Don't wake the field. Don't follow the crows. But by then, it might already be too late. The bell ringer's curse. The sound that shouldn't be heard. Have you ever stood in the fog before dawn, listening for a sound that no living soul should hear? A sound too old to belong in this world. A bell tolling where no hands are left to ring it. This story takes place in the Warren Hills of New England, in a forgotten town called Graves Hollow, a place so faded from the maps that even GPS loses its way. People here still lock their doors at dusk, and children are told never to follow the bell they sometimes hear drifting through the trees after dark. Because the bell belongs to St. Matthias Church. And St. Matthias has been abandoned for nearly a century. The forgotten church. St. Matthias stood at the edge of town, crumbling beneath thick ivy and black moss, its steeple cracked like an old tooth. No one dared enter its rotting doors. No one except Eleanor Byrne, a journalist from Boston chasing forgotten legends. Eleanor wasn't like the people of Graves Hollow. She didn't believe in curses, ghosts, or the shadows people claimed to see in the church windows. She believed in facts. In history. In uncovering the truth behind the fear. But when she stepped off the Greyhound bus with her suitcase and camera, the townspeople didn't meet her with smiles. Just quiet stares and murmured warnings. "You'll hear the bell soon enough," said one old woman at the diner, her voice thin and brittle like old paper. "But when you do, don't answer it." Eleanor smiled politely but tucked the warning away in the back of her mind. Just another small-town superstition. Or so she thought. The bell ringer's legend. The first night in Graves Hollow was still. The kind of stillness that presses against your chest and makes you hold your breath without realizing it. Eleanor stayed in a dusty roadside inn called the Hollow Rest, its rooms decorated with faded floral wallpaper and crosses over every door. She spent the evening reading old newspaper clippings. The legend of St. Matthias dated back to 1883. That's when the first bell ringer, a man named Nathaniel Voss, was found dead beneath the steeple, hanging from the very rope he used to ring the bell. No one knew why he did it, or if he had been pushed. Since then, they say the bell rings on its own during the harvest moon. And anyone who hears it is marked. First come the dreams. Then the whispers. Then the choice. Eleanor smiled to herself, calling it classic rural folklore. But when the clock struck midnight, she heard it. Clear as a heartbeat in the still night air. The bell. The first toll. It rang once. Long, slow, and hollow, cutting through the fog like a blade through silk. Eleanor froze by the window, heart pounding. There was no wind. No storm. No reason for that bell to ring. But there it was. Calling. Against every warning, Eleanor grabbed her coat, her flashlight, and her recorder. This was her chance to catch the story firsthand. She followed the sound through the fog-choked streets of Graves Hollow, her footsteps echoing against cracked pavement. No one else stirred. The whole town seemed frozen in sleep, or pretending not to hear. The church awakens. St. Matthias loomed before her, its front doors half-rotted, a gaping mouth against the night sky. The bell tower above creaked softly in the windless air. As she stepped inside, the temperature dropped. It smelled of mold, rust, and something far older, something that didn't belong to the earth anymore. Her flashlight swept across empty pews, broken stained glass, and the altar cracked in half like a broken promise. And then she saw it. The rope. It swayed gently from the bell tower above. Moving. Though no one was touching it. A chill raced down her spine. She steadied her breath, hit record on her device, and stepped forward. The whisper beneath the bell. As she approached the base of the tower, she heard it. A faint voice, soft as silk and sharp as ice. "Ring it." It was a man's voice. Cold, empty, and patient. "Ring the bell, Eleanor." She spun around, no one there. Just shadows stretching too long across the cracked wooden floor. She raised her flashlight toward the tower's ladder. Its old wooden rung seemed barely able to hold weight. But something pulled her forward. A compulsion. Or maybe a dare from the darkness itself. She climbed. The bell ringer's chair. At the top of the tower, she found a small room beneath the bell. And there, sitting in an old wooden chair, was a man. Or what was left of one. Skin stretched thin over bone. Eyes sunken and empty. Fingers wrapped around the bell rope, frozen in place. Nathaniel Voss. The first bell ringer. He didn't move. Didn't speak. But his hollow eyes stared straight at her, pleading. Or warning. And in that moment, Eleanor realized the legend was true. The bell never stopped ringing because the bell ringer never left. The curse revealed. The whisper came again. This time, from inside her own thoughts. Someone must ring the bell. The bellkeeper's soul was trapped, bound to the tower until another took his place. Eleanor now understood the curse. The first bell ringer was chosen. The next one had to willingly replace him, or be consumed by the madness of resisting. She had a choice. Take his place and free him. Or walk away and let the curse continue, knowing the bell would one day claim her anyway. But before she could decide, the bell rang again. A sharp gust of freezing wind slammed through the tower. The bell swung violently above her, ringing a second time. Her flashlight flickered and died. In that pitch-black moment, she felt a hand, cold and brittle, wrap around her wrist. And a voice, barely a whisper now. "It's your turn." Where no prayers are heard. They say when a bell tolls where no living hand pulls the rope, it's not meant for the living to hear. And if you do hear it, it's already too late. Eleanor Byrne had heard it twice now. And in the cold, crumbling bell tower of St. Matthias Church, surrounded by shadows and silence, she finally realized the stories were not legends. They were warnings. The grip of the past. The skeletal hand holding her wrist tightened. She yanked away and stumbled down the ladder, heart racing, flashlight flickering in her trembling hands. But even as she ran, the bell rang again, slow and hollow, echoing down the tower like a death knell. She burst out of the church into the fog. But something had changed. The streets of Graves Hollow, once familiar, now felt warped, dreamlike, as if she had stepped back in time. Gas lamps flickered where streetlights should be. Cars were gone, replaced by horse-drawn wagons. And faces peered at her from behind curtains, dressed in 19th-century mourning clothes. Eleanor wasn't in her time anymore. The bell had pulled her into its memory. The town's secret. Through whispers on the wind, she learned the truth. Graves Hollow had once been a thriving community until the winter of 1883, when Nathaniel Voss, once the church bell ringer, heard something from the bell tower during a stormy night. He rang the bell to warn the town, but instead, something answered. That night, half the town vanished. Those who remained built their lives around hiding the truth, burying it beneath decades of silence and fear. And they passed down one dark commandment. If you hear the bell, do not follow. And never, ever ring it yourself. But Eleanor had already climbed the tower. Already heard the whispers. She had already been marked. The dreams begin. That night, back in her room at the Hollow Rest, Eleanor dreamed of the bell. It stood alone in a black ocean, tolling over endless waves of fog. And from the water rose pale hands, reaching for her, pulling her down. She woke gasping, the sheets damp with sweat, the air in her room thick with frost. Her reflection in the cracked mirror wasn't quite her own anymore. Her eyes. They looked older. Tired. Like the eyes of someone who had been waiting centuries. The man with the broken cross. On the second night, a stranger appeared at the church gates. Tall, wearing a priest's collar that was cracked and faded with age. His face was gaunt, but his voice was steady. "You shouldn't have gone inside," he said softly. "The bell doesn't just mark you. It invites you." She asked him if there was a way to break the curse. He sighed, his breath curling in the night air. "There is one way. But it requires sacrifice." He explained that the bell demands a bell ringer, a soul to keep the gate between worlds sealed. The only way to stop it from choosing victims was for someone to ring it willingly, taking the previous bell ringer's place. Until now, no one had been willing. They either fled, or lost their minds. But if no one rings it, the priest warned, the door beneath it will open. And what waits beyond will come through. Eleanor's voice trembled. What is it keeping out? The priest's eyes darkened. A world where the dead no longer sleep. The town turns away. Eleanor pleaded with the townsfolk, warning them what was coming. But they only turned away, closing shutters and locking doors. They knew. They had always known. It was easier to sacrifice a stranger than to face the bell themselves. "It's not our burden anymore," said the innkeeper coldly. "You heard the bell. You crossed the church doors. Now it's yours." In that moment, Eleanor realized how the curse had survived so long. The town fed its strangers. Travelers who thought they could solve its mystery. Outsiders who were never missed. And now, she was just another outsider. The madness creeps in. The third night came. The harvest moon rose red and low over the fields. And the bell rang 3 times. Each toll felt like a nail driven into her mind. She began hearing voices in the wind. "Ring it. Ring it. Ring it." She couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. The shadows in her room stretched too long, moving when she didn't. And in her dreams, Nathaniel Voss stared at her, silent tears rolling down his hollow cheeks, begging her to free him. But if she took his place, she'd never leave. Her life, her future, her name, forgotten like his. The choice approaches. On the fourth night, the bell rang without warning. Louder. Closer. It felt as if it was inside her chest now, beating like a second heart. The priest found her on the church steps at dawn, pale and shaking. "The longer you wait, the harder it gets," he said softly. "You either become the bell ringer willingly, or it breaks you first." But Elena couldn't decide. She wasn't ready to give up her life, her world, her future stories still unwritten. She wanted to run. But every road out of Graves Hollow twisted back to the church. There was no escape. The fifth toll. That night, the bell rang again. A fifth time. And the fog rolled into the streets, thick and cold, swallowing the town whole. Figures moved in the mist, shadows of those who had vanished a century ago. Their mouths were open as if screaming, but no sound escaped. They gathered around the church, staring up at the tower, waiting. Waiting for her choice. The question. And in the stillness of the midnight fog, Eleanor faced the door of St. Matthias once more. Would she take the rope and ring the bell, ending Nathaniel's torment and becoming the next guardian? Or would she run and doom Graves Hollow, and perhaps the world, to the horrors waiting beyond the veil? The bell waited. Silent now. For her answer. And the bell tolls on. They say when you stand before the darkness long enough, you begin to understand why some people step into it willingly. Not because they want to disappear, but because someone has to keep the light from going out. The final night. The fog blanketed Graves Hollow like a burial shroud. The streets were silent. The townspeople hidden behind locked doors, pretending the night didn't exist. And there, beneath the cracked steeple of St. Matthias, stood Eleanor Byrne. Cold. Alone. And tired of running. The bell above waited, still as death. The whispers returned, soft and insistent. Ring it. Or lose yourself to it. She thought of her life back in Boston. The city lights. The laughter of friends. The noise and warmth of the world she used to belong to. But none of it mattered now. Not when the dead refused to sleep. The door below the bell. She stepped into the church one final time. But the building wasn't as she left it. The cracked pews and broken windows had changed, now pristine, restored to how they looked in 1883. Lit candles flickered on the altar. And beneath the floorboards, something stirred. Something waiting to be freed. The priest met her by the bell tower stairs, his face grave. "If you don't ring it, Eleanor, the door will open tonight. What comes through will never go back." She asked him quietly, "Did anyone ever choose to stay?" He lowered his eyes. "Only once. A very long time ago." The climb. With trembling hands, Eleanor climbed the ladder one last time. The bell tower groaned under her weight, the wood cold and damp. She found Nathaniel Voss still sitting in his chair. Only now, he smiled, a weak, grateful smile. "Thank you," he whispered. She grasped the rope. It felt cold as ice. And heavier than the world itself. Below her, the fog thickened, and shadowy figures gathered in the church, staring up in silent anticipation. This was her choice. No one could make it for her. She could leave, let someone else face this in another generation. Or ring the bell. And let the curse stop. For now. With a deep breath, she pulled. The last toll. The bell rang once. A deep, hollow sound that shook the foundations of the church and echoed across the hills. The fog recoiled. The shadows froze, their faces turning skyward as if finally at peace. Nathaniel Voss exhaled one last time, and then faded, his body crumbling into dust that scattered in the cold wind. The veil between the living and the dead sealed shut, for now. But Eleanor remained. Her hand still gripped the rope. Her body still in this world. But her soul. Forever tied to the bell. The aftermath. When the fog lifted, the townspeople returned to their routines, silent and unchanged. No one thanked her. No one spoke her name. Graves Hollow simply moved on. They always do. Eleanor's belongings were quietly packed and left at the edge of town, as if she had simply gone missing like so many before her. But those who dared to walk past St. Matthias on quiet nights swore they saw a figure in the bell tower, watching the horizon. Waiting. The curse continues. The bell didn't ring for many years after that. Tourists stopped by, snapping photos of the haunted church, unaware of the sacrifice that kept its doors closed. But legends have a way of enduring. Children whispered her name in dares. Travelers sometimes claimed to hear the bell toll in the fog, though no storms filled the skies. And when the harvest moon rose high, some said they could see her silhouette behind the crack-stained glass, standing watch, alone. The final whisper. And somewhere beneath the earth, beyond the veil of the living, the thing that slept there stirred once more, hungry and patient. The bell silenced it. For now. But eventually, it would wake again. And when it did, someone else would hear the bell toll in the night. And they, too, would face the same choice. Ring the bell. Or let the darkness in. Because in the end, the bell must always ring. The Fog That Whispers, Part 1, Where the Ocean Hides Its Secrets. Have you ever walked along a deserted coastline at dusk, when the fog rolls in thick as ghost's breath? And heard your name carried on the wind? But no one is there to speak it? This is a story from California's Lost Coast. Not the sunny beaches you see in postcards, but the cold, ragged cliffs north of Mendocino, where jagged rocks rip ships apart and the Pacific is less a body of water, and more. A graveyard. The town of Kelders Bay barely clings to the map, carved into the cliffs by fishermen and lighthouse keepers who knew better than to trust the ocean. And for the past 100 years, it's lived under a curse they simply call, the Whispers. The first arrival. A woman named Marina Hale arrived there one fog-choked evening. A marine biologist from San Francisco, running from a life of heartbreak and empty lecture halls. She wasn't looking for ghosts. She came to study the abnormal tides and fog banks reported on this stretch of the Pacific. But what she found was something far stranger. The first night she stepped onto the rocky beach, fog rolled in fast, thick as wool, swallowing the coastline whole. And in that suffocating silence, she heard it. Her name. Whispered, clear as a lover's breath against her ear. Marina. She spun around. No one there. Just the cold spray of the sea and the endless gray. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something beyond the fog was watching her. The lighthouse keeper's warning. At the town's only bar, an old man named Eli Cutter nursed a whiskey by the window, watching the fog roll in like a living thing. Eli was the lighthouse keeper's son. Raised on stories of shipwrecks, drownings, and voices in the mist. He told Marina the truth over a single burning look. The fog ain't natural here. It listens. It learns your name. And once you hear it call you, you're never free. She tried to laugh it off. Fog was just condensation, wind currents, nothing more. But Eli only stared into his glass. Tell yourself that when it follows you inland. The first signs. The fog didn't stay on the coast. The second night, Marina found it creeping through the streets of Kelders Bay, weaving between buildings, slipping beneath doorframes. Street lamps flickered. Dogs refused to leave their porches. And in the stillness, she heard more than her name. Laughter. Weeping. And then the voices of people she knew couldn't possibly be there. Her ex-fiancé's voice, calling from somewhere deep in the fog. Her mother's voice, gone 5 years now, whispering her childhood lullaby. The fog knew her memories. And it used them against her. The history of the Whispers. Digging through old records at the town hall, Marina discovered that Kelders Bay wasn't always cursed. The fog came after a shipwreck in 1904, the Madeline Gray. The Madeline Gray was a cargo ship carrying rare artifacts from the South Pacific. Among them was a jade idol said to contain a spirit of voices. When the ship crashed against the cliffs in a sudden storm, the idol was lost to the sea, and with it, the spirits inside. From that day on, the fog came. Thick, restless, whispering the secrets of those who drowned. And every generation since, it had claimed someone new. The unraveling mind. By the third night, Marina couldn't sleep. The fog pressed against her window like pale, restless hands. She began seeing shapes in it. Faces. A sailor with hollow eyes and torn skin. A woman in a 1900s dress, weeping as she vanished into the gray. Children, their voices calling for their parents in tones of pure heartbreak. The fog wasn't just weather anymore. It was memory made flesh. And Marina's own memories began blending into it. She'd catch herself speaking out loud, answering voices that weren't there. Writing notes to people long dead. Dreaming of drowning in cold water that tasted like tears. The Whisperers packed. On the fourth night, unable to bear it any longer, Marina followed the fog to the cliffs where the Madeline Gray was said to have gone down. There, standing on the edge of the world, was a figure cloaked in shadows. Tall, faceless, wrapped in drifting mist. It spoke in hundreds of voices layered on top of each other. Give us your voice, and we'll leave your mind in peace. She understood then. The fog fed on voices. Memories. The essence of those who listened too long. That's why Eli Cutter spoke so little. Why the townspeople kept their heads down, never speaking more than necessary. If you gave the fog your words, it left you hollow, but alive. The silent town. Marina returned to town to find it quiet. Too quiet. The people went about their business like ghosts, speaking in whispers, avoiding the coastline at all costs. She tried to warn them that the fog was growing stronger, creeping further inland each night. But they already knew. They had lived this story before. And now it was happening again. The coming storm. The weather reports showed an unusual storm system forming off the coast. Winds shifting in patterns no meteorologist could explain. Locals called it the returning tide. Eli Cutter found her at the docks that night, lighting his last cigarette. "The fog's hungry this year," he said. "And it's calling for someone new." She asked, "What happens if no one answers?" He stared out at the ocean, his voice thin. "Then it takes the whole town." The decision. That night, standing on the cliffs as the fog rolled in thicker than ever before, Marina faced a choice. She could leave, abandon Kelders Bay to its fate, and return to her quiet life in the city. Or she could walk into the fog, offer it her voice, and buy the town another decade of peace. But once you give your voice to the fog, you never get it back. And the whispers. They never stop. Into the gray. They say there are places on Earth where the veil between the living and the forgotten is thin. And if you listen too long, you'll forget which side you belong to. Marina Hale was already forgetting. The price of listening. Each morning, she woke to fog curling under her door like fingers reaching for her throat. The voices became clearer, no longer distant whispers, but conversations inside her head. Her childhood best friend, who died at sea. Her father, whose last words she never heard. Even her own voice, calling out from somewhere deep in the gray. But the worst part wasn't the fog. It was the silence that followed it. The kind of silence that presses against your chest until you can't breathe. The old maps. Marina searched the lighthouse records, trying to find answers. She found ancient coastal maps, some hand-drawn by fishermen long gone. On the oldest one, she noticed something terrifying. The coastline had changed. Each decade, the fog swallowed more land. Farms. Roads. Even entire neighborhoods disappeared from the maps. The fog wasn't just haunting the town. It was consuming it. And if the patterns continued, Kelders Bay would vanish completely within a few years. The Whispering Woman. On the fifth night, the fog formed into the shape of a woman on the cliffs. Dressed in torn black lace, her face hidden by a veil of mist, she spoke without opening her mouth. "I once gave my voice to the fog," she said softly. "And now I am its song." The woman revealed herself as Emmeline Gray, the captain's wife from the Madeline Gray. She had walked into the fog a century ago to save her husband's crew. But the fog didn't release her. It trapped her. "I ring the fog bell each night," she whispered. "To warn others not to follow. But you didn't listen." Marina asked if the fog could ever be stopped. Emmeline's answer was cold. "No. It feeds on the forgotten. And there are always more souls to lose." The pact. That night, the whisperer returned. The figure of shadows and mist, standing on the tide-beaten cliffs. Its voice was 1,000 voices speaking at once. "Offer your voice, Marina Hale. Become our echo. And the town will be spared." But this time, Marina asked a different question. "What happens if I refuse?" The fog shifted, swirling like an angry sea. And the voices whispered. "Then we will take every voice in Kelders Bay. Every name, every face, every story, lost in the fog forever." Marina knew then, the fog wasn't evil. It was hungry. It was survival. And she was standing between it and the last remaining souls of Kelders Bay. The silence in town. When she returned to town, she found it nearly empty. Shops closed. Boats abandoned at the dock. People had fled inland, leaving only a handful of stubborn souls behind, Eli Cutter among them. He met her at the lighthouse steps, the wind howling through the foghorn. "You've heard the deal, haven't you?" Eli said, lighting his last cigarette. "Same offer it gave my father. Same one it gave me." She asked him why he never took the deal. He exhaled smoke into the fog. "Because I knew I wouldn't be enough. It's not looking for one sacrifice anymore. It's looking for someone who remembers why they're doing it." Marina fell silent. She understood. If she did this without meaning, the fog would come back hungrier than before. But if she did it knowing what she protected, maybe it would rest. For a while. The storm builds. The next morning, storm clouds rolled in faster than any forecast predicted. The ocean churned with dark swells. And the foghorn, long silent, began to groan low, broken note, as if warning the entire coast. The last few townspeople gathered by the lighthouse. They didn't beg her to save them. They just stood quietly, watching. Waiting. They knew no one could save them from the fog forever. But maybe, just maybe, someone could buy them time. The descent. That night, Marina returned to the cliffs alone. The fog rose higher than the steeple of the lighthouse, curling like massive wings over the ocean. The whisperer waited for her. Silent this time. As if giving her the choice. She stepped forward. "If I give you my voice, will you stop?" she asked. 100 voices answered. For a while. She took a deep breath of salt and cold. Then take it. The fog surged forward like a wave, wrapping around her, filling her mouth, her lungs, her heart. She screamed. But no sound came out. And just like that, the fog retreated. Leaving the cliff silent once more. The hollow silence. When Marina stumbled back to town, her voice was gone. Completely. She could hear. She could think. But her words were part of the fog now. And for the first time in a century, the fog stopped rolling inland. The streets cleared. The ocean calmed. And the sky, for a brief moment, showed stars. But peace in Kelders Bay is never permanent. Because across the horizon, where the fog met the sea, something new stirred. The cycle continues. Eli Cutter found her at the docks, wrapping her in a blanket. He didn't ask what happened. He just said, "You bought us time. Maybe a year. Maybe 10. But the fog never forgets." She nodded, tears stinging her eyes. But no words came. The warning for others. And now, when tourists pass through Kelders Bay, they sometimes hear a story. Of a woman who walks the cliffs at night, her silhouette framed by moonlight, her mouth moving in silent warnings the wind steals away. And on foggy nights, if you listen too closely, you might hear her voice, faint and distant, saying, "Turn back. Don't follow the fog." Some voices are never heard again. But by then, the fog may already know your name. The voice beneath the waves. Some stories end quietly, like the last breath of a candle. And some never end at all. They linger. Like a fog that knows your name. Marina Hale's story didn't end the night she gave her voice to the fog. It only changed shape. The hollow silence. In the days after, Kelders Bay felt lighter. Fishermen returned to sea. Shops reopened. And the fog lifted from the cliffs, retreating like a beast temporarily fed. But Marina remained silent. She walked the docks at dawn, notebook in hand, writing what she could no longer speak. Her face grew pale from the cold air, her mind restless from the dreams that never stopped. Because at night, when the wind changed, she could still hear it. The fog. Whispering her own thoughts back at her. The return of the Madeline Gray. One evening, weeks later, something unexpected happened. A ship's silhouette appeared on the horizon, rusted, broken, impossible. The Madeline Gray. The very ship that had wrecked a century ago. Its masts broken, its hull cracked, but somehow floating just offshore. And from its deck, she saw figures. Pale. Silent. The crew, long dead, trapped between worlds. The fog had brought them back. Not as ghosts, but as warnings. She understood then that her voice hadn't silenced the fog. It had brought her a message. The message in the fog. That night, as the townspeople gathered on the cliffs to watch the ghost ship drift past, the fog rolled in again. Soft. Gentle. Almost curious. And through the mist came a single word, carried on the wind. Prepare. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. The fog wasn't the enemy. Something else was coming. Something the fog itself feared. The whisperer, once so powerful and demanding, now spoke with dread. They are waking. The coming darkness. Eli Cutter met her at the lighthouse, his face grave. "What does it mean?" he asked. Marina, unable to speak, wrote one sentence in her notebook and showed it to him. The fog was protecting us. The fog had been guarding the coastline, keeping something far worse sealed beneath the waves. And now, after a century of sacrifice, the seals were weakening. The ocean wasn't empty anymore. The choice repeated. The whisperer returned one last time at midnight, standing on the beach where the tide kissed the rocks. "You gave us your voice, Marina Hale. Now we ask for more." It wanted a guardian. Not just a sacrifice. But a keeper of the fog's ancient purpose. If she accepted, she would never leave the cliffs. Never return to her old life. Her soul would anchor the fog, holding the sleeping terror below at bay. But if she refused, the sea would open, and whatever waited there would come through. The final sacrifice. She stood at the edge of the world, staring out at the restless ocean. The waves shimmered with ghost light, reflecting stars that no longer existed. And then, without hesitation, she stepped forward. The fog rose to meet her, wrapping her in its cold embrace. She became part of it, her body fading, her thoughts stretching across the coastline like a thin veil of awareness. She was no longer Marina Hale. She was the fog. The watcher. The voice beneath the waves. And for the first time in a century, the cliffs fell silent. The legacy of Kelders Bay. The years passed. Tourists came and went, snapping photos of the lonely lighthouse and the fog-choked cliffs. They laughed at the local legends of the silent woman who watches from the rocks, her outline visible only when the moon is full. But every so often, someone new would arrive. A scientist. A wanderer. A dreamer. And on a foggy night, they would hear it. A voice, soft and distant, calling their name. Inviting them to the cliffs. And the townspeople would close their doors, lower their heads, and wait. Because they knew. The fog always needs a voice. And no guardian lasts forever. The endless cycle. And somewhere beneath the waves, deeper than any light could reach, the thing that slept. Stirred. It was waiting. Patient. Hungry. And when the fog finally failed, it would rise. But until then, a single voice held the line. A voice that once belonged to Marina Hale. A voice that now whispered in the fog. And so, the question remains. When the fog calls your name, will you answer? Or will you run? Knowing someone else will pay your debt? Because in Kelders Bay, the fog never stops whispering. It only waits for the next voice to silence it.